So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Art Forum SF, co-sponsored by the South Asian departments of UC Santa Cruz, Berkeley, and Stanford University, we welcome you all to Sala 2023. The topic for this session is Morning with Masala, with our guest speakers, Sana Javeri Kadri. No? Okay, let's have the correct pronunciation.
No. So the panelists are going to be Zee, on that side, Zee Husain, Pooja Bag, Alak Nanda, and Alize Rizvi, and my name is Madhushree Ghosh. And I'll be moderating this.
With Madhushree Ghosh. And this is a 45-minute session with a 15-minute Q&A. Just a few house rules before we begin. Please put your phones on silent, and no flash photography, please, or recording. So with that, let's give our panelists a big round of applause.
Thank you. Can we get that mic back here? Yes, please. You guys can hear us? Happy Sunday. Are we all awake and up? Awesome. Awesome. My name is Madhushree Ghosh. I'm the author of Khabar, An Immigrant Journey of Food, Memory, and Family. And my TEDx talk was on what we talk about when we talk about food. And in this audience, I'm sure you know what we talk about when we talk about food. So let's get into this. Let me introduce you to our wonderful panelists on this Masala panel. To my left, Alize Rizvi. Alize is the co-founder and CEO of the People. And it is a contemporary South Asian pantry brand that makes cross-cultural products such as hot sauces using South Asian flavors. And her life has been a combination of the East and the West, and her upbringing in Pakistan has led to a strong passion for South Asian culture. She has a master's degree from the Rhode Island School of Design, so a lot of her work is influenced by her design experience that she then incorporates into People, and we'll talk more about her hot sauces. Welcome. Alak Nanda, next to her, is the CEO and CEO of PODI Life. She's the founder of this South Asian pantry shop that offers a wide range of PODIs. And folks who, do you guys know what PODIs mean? All right. And the folks who don't, she will explain it to you this time. She carried her beloved PODIs everywhere when she's lived across the US, Germany, India, and France. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, Alak and her mother, Vasavi, piloted this project in India and got a lot of good vibes from it, which is the reason why in 2021 she launched PODI Life here in the US. She has degrees in chemical engineering and economics and an MBA. She's an underachiever. So we will talk about her underachievements in a bit. Sana could not make it here, but Sana Javeri Kadri formed Diaspora Co. And this was in 2017. And it was a big vision with a small budget, $8,000 in 2017, which has grown. It grew 23-fold since then. And it's a nationally acclaimed brand. And representing Diaspora Co. is Pooja Bag, and she is the head of sales and strategy there. What is interesting about Diaspora Co., and I'm sure a lot of you know a lot about it, is that it is focusing on spices that champions more than 200 regenerative family farms and over 1,500 farm workers. So welcome, Pooja. And then finally, we have Zee Husain. And Zee is the disruptor in this Masala panel because she is the founder of Kula Nursery, which is a grassroots urban nursery working within and for the BIPOC community to increase food sovereignty through garden education and culturally relevant plant starts. Since 2020, Zee has been deeply rooted in the South Asian community in the greater San Francisco Bay Area to understand food preferences and what determines culturally important foods, medicines, and herbs, and what's missing in the local food system. Is it a half an acre, right? It's a half an acre nursery land that she grows multiple different types of vegetables. I would love for you to go check her IG page out. There are some amazing Karela videos if you want to take a look at that. And her nursery is located in Oakland, California. Please give them a warm welcome. All right, so let's get to the bottom of it all. How about we start with the why and the now? We talked about it yesterday at our chai panel, but Diaspora is the only one company that formed in 2017, so a little before the pandemic, but most of you started during the pandemic. So it'll be good for us to hear from you, from all of you, what motivated you and why now? Because who starts a business during the pandemic? You guys do. So tell us.
Hi, everyone. Firstly, just wanted to thank you, Madhushree, for such a nice welcome. My name is Elise, and I'm representing People here. The way that we started was really just our own passion for condiments and our passion for peppers. And where it really starts is when I moved as an immigrant 6 years ago to New York City, I was in the city and I couldn't really find condiments that I had grown up with. One of the things that I loved back in Pakistan was we always had a bowl of peppers on the table, and my mother and I would, crunch on these while we would be eating food. And those peppers we couldn't find in the city. So what we started to do was just kind of go out and look at these craft hot sauces because they're mostly 90% peppers. And that's where the obsession for peppers started for us. And so in 2020, during the pandemic, when we moved down south, we were in Dallas and we were stuck in our home, we decided to plant peppers in our own backyard. The first year went by, there was no harvest. The second year, and I think Zee can explain to that because you've spoken about this in the past. The second year, we had a huge harvest of bhut jalokias and habaneros and serranos. And I remember my husband and I just running around and just being so excited about all these peppers because we just, loved them. But I think one of the reasons why we started was because we realized that, in the modern pantry today, there is such absence of South Asian brown voices. When I talk about hot sauce, it's mostly peppers, and we know our peppers, but there is no representation in the hot sauce community of South Asian voices. And the other part of this was that we were really lacking in the flavor profiles. It was a lot of silly heat, I would say. There was no flavor in the hot sauces. They were 80-90% vinegar. You pick up any hot sauce in the market now, it's 80-90% vinegar. It's very little produce. There are no spices in there. So what we realized was the hottest peppers in the world come from India, Pakistan. And actually the hottest pepper, Carolina Reaper, was a cross between a Pakistani pepper called Naga Morij and a Caribbean pepper. And I think when I learned this fact, I was like, why are we not talking about this stuff? Like, why is nobody talking about this? So, of course, this passion project turned into something we wanted to take forward. And I think the main idea was really to infuse and our flavors into these peppers that are coming from Mexico, where obviously most of the peppers are cultivated today in the world. And we, keep the vinegar level down. We produce a low sodium content hot sauce and add those spices that are our own, like anardana and amchur, and really kind of diversifying the flavor profiles, but keeping the heat. So that's what we're doing, and I'm going to pass on the mic to Alak to talk about hers.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. Much like Elise's People, PODI Life is also a passion project. It really started with my mom and I just really having very existential conversations during the pandemic and really talking about her connection with food, with her mom, my connection with food, with my mom, and how PODIs have sort of been a constant. PODIs, for those who know them, they are seasonings made of roasted lentils, herbs, nuts, and spices, and they always show up in care packages from grandparents, from grandmothers, and there's such a strong connection that we have, if you are of South Indian origin, with PODIs. In talking about sort of the pandemic, when I say existential, we're talking about legacy, and we're talking about, what is it that we as people sort of leave behind as an impact. And my mom has had a very traditional life. Her name is Vasavi. She's had a very traditional homemaker sort of a life, but she's got incredible culinary talent. And so in India, when we were stuck in our apartment that I grew up in as two adults sort of sharing space, negotiating who will cook lunch and who will cook dinner, I ended up learning how to make PODIs. I did not know how to make PODIs. I had led a 10-year-long career in very analytical roles up until then. My cooking chops are, I would say I'm an amateur in the sense that I have a great love for cooking, but I really deepened my understanding of cooking from her during that time. We were in lockdown for 6 months in India, so I learned a lot. And during that time, in learning how to make PODIs, I really built an appreciation for how precise the art of making PODIs was. So in developing that appreciation and in sort of having PODIs with me in all the countries that I'd lived in and sharing with all the friends from different cultures, I knew that there was something there in the sense that there's versatility in the condiment. I wanted to celebrate her talent with it. And I think the mission and the vision for PODI Life is constantly evolving. But the basis is definitely very personal, and we constantly try to bring a very intergenerational perspective of food to the brand, to what we do. So yeah, that's how we started and why we started.
All right, so Diaspora Co., as was mentioned, started in 2017. At the time, our founder, Sana, was working at Buy Right Market in San Francisco, so not too far from here, and really seeing the level of care that was given to sourcing things like produce. So you could tell who was the farmer that made that grew that tomato, where did it come from, all that information was clear. And then as she talked to people about spices, things that came from India, everyone's response was like, oh yeah, like we don't know where it comes from, but it comes from India, so it must be great. And so that was something that was nagging at her. And then at the same time, turmeric lattes were becoming really popular. So Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop and like everyone was drinking these turmeric lattes, and honestly, they tasted pretty bad. Like really dusty, sad turmeric. And so Diaspora originally started as an art project and a research project for Sana, where she was going to India to figure out where does this turmeric that everyone's going gaga about paying $7 for a really bad version of, like where does that come from, and who are the people behind it, and are they actually seeing any of that profit? And really realizing that spices are this fresh product that we have not treated as such. If you go to the grocery store and buy spices, on average, they're 2 to 7 years old. They've gone through different warehouses, sat around, a bunch of different varieties are mixed together, and they just aren't treated like the fresh products that they are. So Diaspora was really an attempt to address those issues, the fact that the farmers were not getting compensated. They're getting 1%, maybe 2% of the final price. And the customers are getting stale, bad spices. And so that was the opportunity that led to our founding.
Thank you, Pooja. I'm feeling so grateful and inspired by being on stage with everyone. I just wanted to say that. So I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would ever consider myself a farmer or even a small business owner. My background is in sustainable agriculture, and in particular, I was studying food security issues in the Central Valley, studying disadvantaged communities and farm worker problems and groundwater problems. And during the pandemic, when everything went into lockdown, my research position got put on hold, and that's when I really started to think about what this food sovereignty movement meant to me personally. And one large pillar of the food sovereignty movement is culturally relevant foods. And when I started to think about the culturally relevant foods that my ancestors ate, and those medicines, those foods, those herbs, I realized that many of those foods were not available in our local food system. And I started to dig deeper into and understand why these foods were not available. And I started simultaneously finding seeds for these foods, like karela and duri and tindora and all these foods that I had been asking my nani about and my mom about, like, what are these foods that you haven't had in decades here in the United States? And I started growing them, and little by little I noticed these reactions, these very visceral, very nostalgic reactions that people were having, people very close to me were having to these foods. And that's what really made me realize that this is very important. These foods are very important to the people that I consider closest to me, and I wanted to increase the availability of these foods, and through that, my journey has begun.
We're just going to be passing this mic back and forth, so just look at us while we do that. Let's get more into the meat of this. Spice trade's been going on forever. It did not start just because the West found us. We've been trading spices all the way from South Asia all the way to China and back, and down south and back, and east and back. Our foods are very similar. We try to, and borders are really porous. Borders are man-made, so they really mean nothing unless you want it to mean something. So let's talk more about what you have been doing with your work, as in what is most important in your mission and your vision, given that hot sauces are not really what we do, right? So you're changing the narrative, Elise. You're changing the narrative of what a hot sauce could be, and yet you're pulling in your ancestral knowledge in there. So what was the mission when you started doing it? It just wasn't a passion project. You know that. You're short selling yourself. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So for me and my husband, who's also a partner in the business, we started out by thinking about the techniques that we were going to use. Of course, we were always comparing ourselves to like what was available in the market, because we really felt that, Zee spoke to the freshness, and Pooja spoke to the freshness of the spices, but the freshness of the produce was one thing. And then the process that we use is fermentation. So as you all know, fermentation is something that's being done in Asian cultures for a very long time. It's not necessarily just limiting to like achar and things like that. We could have very much done that too, but we felt that there are a lot of voices, brown voices, who are contributing to that already. What we started to do was to really look at the product in the sense that, we wanted to add flavor to the hot sauce aisle, but thinking about what would be the use of that product. In the West, usually hot sauce is used, you find it at every restaurant, cafe, terminal. It's used to kind of add heat, just a little bit of sourness and heat to your meal. But we started thinking about like, what if this is a spice blend in a bottle? So you could cook with it. So, as people who eat a lot of heat, flavor was very important. Depth of flavor was very important. And the process of fermentation really requires this meditative state, right? Like it's a very active relationship with your, what you're making, what you're creating. It takes 6 to 8 weeks at minimum. So we've had instances where we've had orders and we haven't been able to fulfill because we're like, look, like it's fermenting right now. So there's nothing I can do. And so what we started off with just like practices that are sustainable in nature, and thinking about like bringing those are things that we've learned from our culture, right? They're really thinking about every stage of creating this product. But at the same time, I think my vision was to change the conversation about heat and spice. As a woman, I feel that in here in the West, if you look at the hot sauce culture, the popular like pop culture, it's a very aggressive, it's a very kind of macho man. it's very gendered, yes it is. And I think a female voice in this is almost non-existent. Women who eat a lot of hot peppers in the West are considered to be like spicy women, or, I don't know how, I've heard all kinds of things. And I think what I really wanted to do is just, if you look at our bottles, if you look at our labels, we're very inspired by the botanical illustrations in scientific books, because fermentation is a scientific process. And in the language as well, we try to pay tribute to and homage to our roots. So people is a play on words, but it really comes from that memory during the pandemic where my husband and I were sitting, we were talking about the people ka darakht that my nani's backyard used to have, and we would sit under it, have chai, and the electricity would go out and we'd sleep under it. And we're talking about how we are the people of the people tree. And that's something that is not just in Pakistan, I know it's in India, it's in all over the subcontinent, right? So, with that mission in mind, that what our kind of compass would be just the value system that our parents have taught us, our ancestors have taught us, and we'll use those techniques to bring something new. But I think the conversation piece of that also is that I want people to approach spice in a way that is non-threatening. We don't have labels that have aggressive visuals of people bleeding and, eating these things and deforming faces. We want to welcome people to try these hot sauces because they actually add flavor and depth to your meals.
Thank you. I think the conversation here is really what all these wonderful entrepreneurs are doing, which is changing the narrative in what we think fermented foods are. Fermented foods are far Asian, right? South Asian foods, you don't really think about that. And you've changed that. In Bengali culture, we have, I don't know how many Bengalis are here, but we have what's called kashundi, which is fermented mustard. But let's go back to the topic that you were talking about, which is transferring knowledge through generations and why that's important. And that's a great question for Alak. Your illustrations on your product is very, I would say, impish. It's very playful, and yet you have not compromised on the name of your company, which is PODI. Do you want to talk about how that came about?
Yeah, I think, see, when we were immigrants, I'm an immigrant. I immigrated here twice, once in '98, another time in 2005. I was pretty scarred after my '98 experience. So I came, when I migrated, immigrated in 2005, it was a much bolder version of me. And I think that's just how we are, right? We humans, we cope. But also we have a tendency, I feel like, to pander to the majority oftentimes, and I did not really want to do that with the brand. I didn't feel like that would be a great way to reflect my mom and me, for us to sort of not call it just not call it just South Indian seasonings, but to call it PODI, to educate people on what PODI is. And I love talking to people about what PODI is, because oftentimes actually what I've realized is that many people don't know. People who are of South Indian origin, for us, PODI is something very special, but we also take it almost for granted because it's been with us for generations. And, I come from so I was born in a small city in the south of India called Warangal. And my dad is the first of he has 5 other siblings, all of whom were rice farmers. He's the first to actually have a professional degree, but he's very attached to his agricultural roots. My parents live in Georgia, and he always keeps saying, I'm just going to go buy land in Florida and just go into farming. So, I think the land really calls to him. I grew up getting this magazine at home called Annadata, which is an agricultural magazine. My dad watches a lot of videos about, in vernacular languages, how agriculture, how can you grow something, what do you add? And my mom brings all of that. It's a shared passion for my mom and my dad. I share a lot of videos about what my mom does in her garden. She grows a lot of vegetables. She has found belonging in the US with growing these vegetables to sort of make that little patch of land her own. By growing these vegetables. So I really do, understand what you say, when you say culturally relevant foods in connection to the land. I grew up with this. I wanted to bring that connection into what we do. And, in the US, agriculture is very industrialized. We've really lost the connection to where the food is grown, how it's grown, what it looks like. So with the illustrations, that's what we've done. It is very key ingredient centric. We have a crunchy peanut podi where, our mascot Piku, they're on a peanut farm. Then there is a spicy coconut podi. There's a coconut plant that they're climbing. So I think that is the ethos that the South Asian diaspora has, because we come from lands where agriculture is a big part of our culture. Yes. We have harvest festivals. It's such a big part of our rituals. We don't necessarily talk about the agriculture, but it's almost ritualized into our lives, right? So it is a big part of our ethos, but in the US, we are quite disconnected from the food systems. And I think I wanted to bring that back in a playful way. And what is a better way to do it than through pictures? I've always wanted to write a children's book, so I found an incredible children's book author, illustrator. Her name is Aryama. So it was a very collaborative project. Worked with her to create the illustrations for the products.
Thank you. PODI Life has a little stall in the marketplace. Go smell their curry leaf powder. Oh my goodness. But talking about illustrations, talking about what the product looks like. Instead of really talking about the product per se, I would love for a raise of hands who knows what the diaspora packaging looks like, right? It's not even marketing, it's joy. It's joy. So could you, Pooja, tell us more about that and how consciously you designed that? Because what all of you are doing, in my opinion, is changing the narrative in many different ways, including how we look at food. So tell us a little bit more about diaspora.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very timely conversation. We just rebranded our packaging August 15th, so important day for us in many ways. So a lot of my last year has been figuring out what does our new packaging look like. First of all, the reason behind having new packaging is we shifted all of our production from the US to India. We wanted things to be packaged as close to the farm as possible. So you're getting the freshest product. So everything is harvested within, as recent of a harvest as we can get. It's packaged as close to the source as possible. So you're, again, preserving that freshness. So the things that we wanted to think about are how do we communicate the story and the roots of the brand just by looking at the packaging. Our packaging previously was clear glass jars, which are beautiful. When we were mostly selling online, they worked really well because that's the last piece of the puzzle. You're already seeing all the storytelling. You're getting the story of the farmers and the product before you click buy and end up with that product in your mail. Right now, as a brand, we're thinking about how do we show up in the world and capture people's attention beyond our website, and a lot of that has been telling the story on the package. So we also make use of illustrations. We have illustrations of the plants that every spice comes from on the front. We have information about the farmers and exactly where in India or Sri Lanka are these spices coming from. And then we're also linking to recipes and making sure that people have the inspiration, both in a culturally contextual way of, okay, this is how this spice is used in its native setting, as well as what are different ways that you can explore. So one thing that we constantly have a bit of a tension with is how Indian of a brand or how South Asian of a brand do we want to be? Like, yes, we are rooted in South Asian culture, but that doesn't mean that you, like, some people come up and they're like, oh, I don't cook Indian food, so I don't know how to use your spices. I'm like, you use black pepper. Like, I know you do. A lot of these products have been taken out of their South Asian context and been given this new imagination and this new provenance in the eyes of a lot of consumers. And so part of our role is to say, how do we get people to associate black pepper, not with cacio pepe, not with steak au poivre, like it's an South Indian spice. It is grown in Kerala. People should understand where it comes from, and then you can use it however you want beyond that, but also have acknowledgement for the history and the roots of it. So
Thank you.
all of that is, trying to show that on the package.
Thank you. So I'll go back to the same question I asked Pooja, which is, what brings you joy? What brings you joy when you do something that is so labor intensive? And really, plants don't talk back, but sometimes they do. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think the plants talk back. Yeah, I mean, I think the greatest joy for me through all of this has been the countless conversations I've been so privileged to have with my nani, who is my grandma on my mom's side, and my mom, and learning about all these really beautiful memories that they still carry with them about eating certain foods or growing up with certain plants nearby. And really what I see these as being these are very special storytelling moments, and they're ways for knowledge transfer and ways for our culture to continue on. So all these stories have just made me feel closer to these foods that my ancestors ate. And now I have developed a new relationship with these foods. And now I hope that I can carry on this relationship to my future generations and create and help with this knowledge transfer through the next generation. And I think there have been so many other countless joys that have happened through this nursery, but definitely the familiar aspect, the familial aspect has been the greatest for me.
Wonderful. So I'll still ask you another question. So if folks wanted to, so I live in San Diego, so if I wanted a curry leaf plant, is it possible to get one from your nursery, or am I supposed to drive up and get it back down? That's not really good for climate change, but tell us.
Yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. How do I expand while also wanting to feel sustainable? I want this to live on for many years, and farming in general is very difficult. It's very hard on my body, it's very labor intensive, and at the same time it brings me so much joy and so much healing, and it has brought me so much community. So I've been playing around with this idea of, do I want to ship plants, or do I just want my plants to live and be given to the next person within my own greenhouse? And at the moment, that's just what I'm doing. I'm growing my plants, and I have them available in my greenhouse in West Oakland, and people come to me to buy the plants. But I am growing seeds on my farm, and I'm hoping to make that available to everybody in the United States, and creating the education around how to grow these seeds and how to really preserve the legacy of these seeds and these foods. So that's how I hope to grow and have it still be sustainable for myself.
Thank you. So maybe Alak, can we talk a little bit about, we can't have a spice panel without talking about how spices are affected by the lack of water and the consistent topic of climate change and what we are doing. It's great to talk about climate change. It's wonderful for us to look serious about it and say, oh, the world's going to end, and look at us being so serious about it. But what are we really doing, and what are your brands doing about that?
Great question. So there was an article recently that, in the Hindu, the Karnataka edition, where a reporter sort of wrote about PODIs actually as a great solution to climate change, because what you're doing with PODIs is you're roasting ingredients, you're increasing the shelf life of something, and you can use it for a long stretch of period. And I thought that was a very refreshing perspective. But that aside, as a brand, what we are also doing is, I've been looking into millets a lot, and millets are wonderful, and millets have been a part of South Indian tradition, South Asian tradition. China actually used millets before it used rice. It's a very ancient grain, and we actually switched to rice because of the fact that you can grow it at scale, right? But now with climate change, we're kind of going back and looking at millets, because It's a climate change resistant grain. It has a low carbon footprint. You actually naturally, when you grow it, you don't need to add any pesticides. So it's regeneratively grown. So there's been a massive sort of in India. If you've kept up with Indian conversation around food, millets have been a really big part of that. So that's something we are, hoping to bring. We've actually tested out 2 products and hoping to launch by the end of the year. So that's one piece. We are an evolving business. As we learn, the brand, will evolve with us. But that's one piece that we have addressed.
Thank you. Elise?
Yeah, I think similar to Alak, I mean, fermentation is such a great sustainable way of preserving foods. We've been doing it for centuries for that reason. And I mean, growing up, I remember having jars of just fermenting pickles in my mother's pantry. And I think just by using that, one of the things that I want to really point out, like we don't drain the produce at all. So it just ferments in a salt brine, and we grind it, we blend it, and it just comes to you. So I think that is obviously a really good way that we kind of involve the sustainable practice into our thinking. But I think I also think about it in a more holistic way. Like, I think there's a certain level of meditation that is required in the thought of sustainability, because you're thinking about every how the system works for a certain product and a certain thing that you're working with. So I think for me personally, you're not just thinking about it in the sense of like what is the environmental impact, but also just the communities involved. So for us, when we were making these saucers ourselves, we recently found a co-packer, and it was a search of like 8 months to find a co-packer, because we wanted to make sure the co-packer that we were supporting was a local farm that was close to us, and because hot sauce is such a specific thing that you make, we found one 6 hours away from us, and that to me is a way that I was very intentional about what I want. I did not want these hot sauce bottles, which are again in glass, to come all the way from Portland, whereas Portland has a very thriving hot sauce culture, or even Pennsylvania. So we kind of found somebody 6 hours away, and I remember when they accepted us, because they had a very rigorous process, we were just so excited. They had never come across a South Asian brand. They were very excited to introduce us to their kind of audience as well. So I think I always think about it in the way that is my ethos. That's my compass. Thinking about sustainability however I can, and understanding that as a small business, it's hard to think about it, right? Like, larger corporations are able to do a lot because they have access to those funds. We really have to uphold our values when we're thinking about these things, and also make sure that they kind of align with what the company is trying to do and what the vision for the company is.
So that would be primarily customer driven. So your customer has to support you in that sense, right?
Absolutely.
So to that point, and maybe we can pass it over to Pooja, we as South Asians are very price conscious. And here we are talking about climate change, sustainability. We use our price consciousness as a badge of honor and an asset. But we also spend a lot of money on things we shouldn't. You know that, you do it. So how is the story around pricing and why it is what it is for diaspora?
Yeah, great question. One that we get asked a lot, especially, honestly, especially a lot of those questions come from our own community and come from people being like, I know I can get pretty good turmeric for like 50 rupees in India, so why should I buy it from here? You can, and great, and you should, but also like you can't find that here, and you can't find that. First of all, like that, it's accessing it in the States and being able to know that not only am I accessing a product that has this high quality, but it's also paying the farmers equitably. So we share exactly how much we pay each of our farmers. If you go on our website, you can see here's what the commodity price is, here's what fair trade price is, which is 15% of on top of the commodity price, and here's what diaspora is paying, which is, on average is 3 to 5 times the commodity price. And the way that we set our prices with our farmers is in conversation with them and to understand what does it take to pay all of the workers what we consider a living wage? What does it take to pay all the women and the men on your farm the same? What does it take to make sure that you have the financial security, that you are not going to get predatory loans and then creating this cycle of debt that then creates generational issues?
It's debt and suicide.
Yeah.
I think we don't talk about the farmer suicide. It's an epidemic, and it is very, very finance driven.
Yeah, and the system right now where farmers have to get all these loans to pay for their inputs, what we're doing differently is we pay them an advance. So none of our farmers have to take out loans in order to produce the product that we're buying from them. And so ultimately, that all gets reflected in our final cost. So yes, we are more expensive, but if you think, like, if in general, this applies to food and across any category, if it's cheap, it's because somebody else is paying the price. You even if you're not paying it, the communities, the people, the animals, like depending on the product, like somebody else is paying that price. And in this case, we believe it's better for us, the consumers, to be doing that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I don't think there's anything that's free in this world. Somebody's paying for it. Alak, do you want to add to that about pricing and?
Yeah, I can absolutely add to that. Yeah, in our case, we source our lentils. We currently we are a 2-year-old business. So we currently use a supply chain that we have access to. So last year, I did visit a couple of farms in India, especially for spices, the spices that we use. In fact, the city where I was born, Warangal, there's a particular type of chili that's actually, it's a very vibrant red color chili called chapada chili, and we use it in pickles a lot, especially in the south. So that's one chili that we've been trying with our PODIs. We blend it with other chilies that we get. So we are in that research and development process of getting our spices. But I did speak to a trader and an exporter about lentils, because lentils are a big part of the PODIs that we make, and what they actually told us was the best quality lentils actually get exported out of India, which is kind of the sad reality, which means we actually get the best quality of lentils in the US. And that's one of the key learnings that I had. In terms of manufacturing, all of our PODIs are stone ground, so we actually use very traditional methods of production. They're all manufactured in the US in a commercial kitchen. We ensure that everyone is paid a living wage of $15 an hour. And that's a small way in which we are ensuring that people who are part of the production are getting paid. I think we also have a tendency to take our matriarch's labor for granted because, oh, my grandma can make it, it'll just come to me, and like my auntie can make it, it'll just come to me, and then why should I buy a PODI for this much? Absolutely, you don't have to at all. But I think it's worthwhile thinking, we are not, even if you're getting it from someone, the thing is like, it's worthwhile, especially if you're buying it from someone, how do you value their labor? I think that's the question, right? And it's a process of self-reflection there.
Thank you. Alize, do you want to add to that too?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of you spoke to that. I think in our case, again, going back to the fermented peppers, they are largely like very expensive compared to just getting peppers. And I think the process, because it takes time and effort to, put them in a salt brine and have to wait, the pricing obviously.
And you're still growing them?
We're not growing them anymore.
Okay.
Thank God for that, because I don't know if I would be sitting here if I was growing them. We're not growing them anymore. We were doing all of it until April of this year, and now we finally found our co-packer, who is doing everything. But sourcing those peppers is very expensive, and also the thing that we need to realize is most market sauces, like they're adding 70-80% vinegar, so the produce tends to be very little. It's mostly just vinegar and salt. And in our case, you can really feel the freshness of the peppers themselves, but also the produce that we add. So like in some of our sauces, we have like, cilantro, or we have onions, garlic, yellow bells. All of those things are freshly sourced, and they're added and blended into the sauce with the peppers and the spices. So what you're basically tasting is 90% of the produce. That's exactly why we tell people you can cook with them. So it's not just serving the purpose of dab onto your meals, but it's serving the purpose of cook with these hot sauces. So they're very different from like your Tabascos and Cholulas, which I appreciate. I think there's a purpose for those sauces too. But
no shade to them.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think maybe we could pivot a little bit to still talking about spices, still talking about what we are doing, but what is authentic. We talked about this at our chai panel yesterday. Nothing is authentic if borders are porous, and borders are porous. And so Kula Nursery is growing ancestral seeds, ancestral plants. We're going to touch upon this topic a little bit, because this is a topic that you could have a workshop on. But when we are in a land that is not ours, and this is the immigrant's dilemma, where do we belong and how do we belong? And when we are growing our ancestral produce, seeds, and plants in native land,
Big topic.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something I think about a lot, of being, I'm also an immigrant, and now I'm growing my ancestral foods from my ancestral lands on somebody else's ancestral lands. So what does that mean? How do I do that with a good conscience? And I don't think it's a black and white answer. I think this is something that needs a lot more conversations with a lot of different parties involved. But I do think that growing ancestral foods is a way of bringing people together. It's a way of building community. And if we are able to include other voices and other communities, and if we're able to uplift each other, doing the ancestral hard work together, that's how beautiful communities can be built, and how we can reclaim our culture, and how our traditions can continue to live on. So yeah, I mean, it's a very complex
Thank
idea.
you for that. I think if we acknowledge that we are South Asians, we are the diaspora, we are the immigrants who've come here, and we are in land that is not really ours, and we acknowledge that, but continue to respect and honor where we come from while we make this land ours. I think with that a positive note, I will open this up to questions from the audience. Please raise your hand so somebody can get the mic over to you.
Hi, thank you for this conversation. It's really interesting. I wanted to find out where your products are available online, and are you looking into getting into the retail market? So, thank you.
Yeah, so we are online, peoplepeople.com. You can go there and check it out. But we are also in 60 stores across the country, mostly independent shops, and 95% women-owned stores who want to stock us. So all the way from Portland to New York City, you will find us in many stores. And how that happened too is very organic. It's just, we stocked with one store and everybody wanted a hot sauce, and they found a Desi woman company with a hot sauce. So yeah, that's for me. But
so PODIs right now are sold online. So we are selling at podilife.com. You'll find all of our products there. We are not in retail stores yet, but hopefully soon.
Diaspora Co. is available online as well, diasporaco.com. Also outside, we have a table. And in general, we're also at a bunch of different independent stores, about 200 across the US. And we are in the process of getting into retail more broadly. We're part of Whole Foods Accelerator right now. That means that we should be coming to Whole Foods shelves pretty soon, which is really exciting. And I think hopefully it's just the start of creating more space for South Asian brands in mass grocery.
So my plants are available in my greenhouse in West Oakland. And then I'm hoping to be selling a few very special varieties of seeds through Second Generation Seeds, which is an Asian-owned seed company based in here in California, Northern California. So that should be available this winter.
First off, very inspiring to see such young women entrepreneurs. Congratulations to all of you. It's a great effort. While we talk about accessibility of these products in this country, I mean, it's awesome that my kids get to have these here. But at the same time, something crossed my mind when my mom said she had the best mangoes during the pandemic in India because they didn't get exported to the US. So I'm starting, it's a matter of concern because things like turmeric and PODI, which are affordable to people in India because of the farmers getting attracted to the higher dollar margin than when they export it to the US. How do we make a conscious effort so that something that continues to be affordable for everyone in India with a huge population who don't have the minimum wages the same as here in the US, how do we balance the two?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's something that we think about a lot. We get asked a lot if we sell our spices in India, and right now we don't because that is not, we feel that's not our place right now to be selling in India because we are working with each of these farmers who also sell them independently. So we're not there to say hey, we need to be this middleman in India. Each of our farmers has a local market and is selling locally. And if they want to expand beyond that, and we think about the US, then that's where we step in. But as far as making sure that there still is access to all these products, at least when we work with our farmers, we are almost never the only buyer. We don't want to be. That's not a safe position to put them in. And we want to make sure that if anything happens to us or to the, we don't want them to be overly reliant on just us. So part of our work is also saying, hey, let's find you other buyers and let's make sure that you have ways to get your product in other parts of the country. And then as far as creating incentives around why sell to India versus why exporting, I think there's a bit of give and take there where some of the issue is also the community in India also learning to price or the value products at the way that we're able to in the States. And some of that is, yes, we have the privilege to do that, but some of it is also just how we choose to spend our money. As of now, the farms that we work with are small enough that we're not significantly diverting a bunch of the turmeric from the broader population in India. And I don't think we ever want to get to that point either, because that's why we're really selective about who we work with.
Yeah, I think to answer your question around PODIs, I'll keep this brief. We are manufacturing in the US for the US market. And, there have been people who've reached out to me saying, oh, your brand inspired me to start this in India. So I just hope that younger generations sort of continue on these traditions and figure out a way to do it in a fair way, both for the manufacturers, for everyone involved in the supply chain, right? So I just hope that we all do that consciously for the markets that we are in.
Thank you. That's a great point. I think there are a couple of things that I wanted to address. These are amazing entrepreneurs. They are not of the generation of the folks who've come, including myself. They happen to be women. So I just want to acknowledge that the next generation is teaching us a lot, and the generation after is teaching us even more. And so before we acknowledge the gender, I think we should acknowledge how much they're changing the narrative of who an entrepreneur should be.